So today, speaking again with Melinda Muth, who is, she's a woman of many talents. She's been a consultant to Web Profits over the years, and she's helped us kind of overcome like a lot of challenges at key times in our trajectory. She has so many kind of accolades to her name. She's the author of a book. She's a board advisor and a fellow of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. She's the director of Streamwise Learning. She's a facilitator. She has a list as long as, I don't have an example for how long it is, but check out her LinkedIn profile. She's someone that we go to for the harder questions around people and culture. And there's not many people that are like that. It seems like that's one of those softer sciences. Is that what it's called? Is it a soft science? Or
wow.
I've made you angry.
Call it soft. It's really the
no. It's people. It's the people's. It's the people side. It's not black and white. I think if it was black and white, lots of spreadsheet people would be a lot better at the management side of things, at the cultural side of things, right? But before I insult you any further by calling it soft, I just want you to. So welcome, Melinda.
Thank you, Alex.
So how should I refer to it instead? It's not a soft science. What's it called? The people and the culture side of things. How would you refer that, like, as an area? You've got the data side of things and you've got the people side of things, I guess. Is that how you would refer to it?
I suppose we could think about what universities call some of those things, the humanities.
The humanities.
Humanities. Now, and people might think of literature or history, but that's the, the softer, gooey stuff. But I like that word, humanity.
The humanities. Yeah, and I think that's the one thing that in this capitalist world that we live in, humanity is not always the priority, is it? A lot of the time it's the quarterly report, it's the numbers, it's the growth, it's the stats, it's the charts, it's all that stuff, right?
It's a very interesting time in the world to ask that question, because I think most citizens, despite not wanting to be cooped up in their houses, have been happy that government's focused on their lives, their human lives, rather than a balance sheet. And so there were a lot of debates still going on about we can't shut the economy, and people making the argument we have to have the economy because people have to make a living so they can eat. And so their first priority is the economy versus the governments who made their first priority people and their health. So I don't know about you, but I think I prefer to live in a society where the government is interested in whether I'm healthy enough to stay alive.
Yeah.
And I don't think, and it's not either or. Because that's
sure.
That human beings want to make, that you want to make it this or that, and it's not or, it's and.
It is and, isn't it? And I think because this is the second time that we're having you on the podcast, and it's in a different scenario this time. It's not like in our office; it's in Zoom, and this is the scene I think that everybody that can operate a business is actually having to see, is like the Zoom screen. But I figured, and I think. So you're the first person that's come on the podcast twice so far, but a big part is because your the insight which you have around people, culture, stress, what's happening in society, I think is so it's certainly a conversation I think other people should be part of, and I certainly have lots of questions which I'm interested in hearing, just what you think about it, and I think that this is going to add like quite a lot of value to lots of the leaders out there that are trying to figure out, kind of how to stay in business, kind of how to look after your people, how to maintain your culture, like how to be a good leader right now, like the challenges of trying to focus on kind of ensuring that the business sustains itself through this horrible kind of health crisis without being seen as opportunistic. but all the responsibility of having staff. There's so many challenges right now from that side of it. And so I guess that's what I wanted to speak about today. Yeah. So can we maybe start by kind of with the question, so what are you seeing kind of happening like in the world today from a corporate perspective, with all the stuff that's going on? Because, I mean, it's changed so much in the last 2 months, hasn't it? 3 months ago, we were having certain conversations. 2 months ago, those conversations have changed. And now we're living in a whole new world, Like, how are you seeing that unfold, just from the conversations and just from the stuff that you're seeing?
Well, I think you would describe it as stages of fear and grief. And if you think about, I don't know if you've ever read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her stages of grief. First there's anger, then there's denial, then there's upset, then there's acceptance, then there's recovery. And I think we've seen all of those things in response to COVID-19. Denial and anger, you're taking away my job, you're shutting things down, you're shutting me in. And then, people are dying. So then the fear comes in and people, accepted lockdown. And then they were locked down in fear and looking for the end of the tunnel. And when's it going to end? When's it going to end? All the comments in the press about mental illness and anxiety, and you could see the stages in terms of, people wanting to fund more for domestic violence, all those things. And now in Australia, at least Australia and New Zealand, we seem to be coming through. And now we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, and we have to decide, now we were sitting still. Now we have to come out of it somehow. And I suppose if I were to sum all that up, it makes me think about a Harvard Business School crisis management series that I listened to. And one of the professors, I think it was Dutch Leonard, he said, in this whole, to resolve your response to this situation, you have to, it's like all the things that you face when you're trying to innovate, except it's innovation, rapid innovation under stress amidst fear.
Rapid innovation amongst stress.
Under stress
amongst fear.
Fear.
That pretty much sums the last 6 to 8 weeks in business. And people, lots of people who might be talking about innovation, they were now literally on the burning platform. And some people were just swallowed up by the anxiety of it all. And other people had to try, to figure out what to do. But it's interesting, there's no solutions. There's no solutions. You have to find them or make them along the way. And you have to keep, we have to keep trying things. It's like what we have to do now. We have to lift some restrictions and we have to see if the thing blows out again. And then we might have to, so we have to crawl very slowly through the tunnel towards the light and try things along the way. And, when we get a piece of evidence, respond to that. We can't freeze up, but we have to go very carefully. Nobody can just, some countries think they can just run through to the end. I'm thinking Brazil. Yeah.
I hope I'm not offending any Brazilians, but it looks like they're just doing the strategy of, there's not any leadership about it. You're sort of deciding on your own. And then and if you can believe what you see on the news, you see these mass grave sites and you see people protesting because they haven't experienced it themselves. Like maybe they don't know anybody that died. And so, when I say innovation under stress amidst fear, the fear part is probably the thing that I've seen operating the most. And if you think about the fear instincts that people have, it's really interesting. There's these things embedded in human behavior, main things that we're afraid of.
Like what? Like what's some examples of that?
So contamination is one. Contamination and germs really gets people's attention. And boy, has COVID-19 got our attention.
My hands are clean, by the way. I've washed them 17 times today so far.
You wouldn't shut the economy down for climate change with the planet on fire or Australia on fire, but you'd shut it down for a germ. I mean, people don't even seem to remember the bushfires happened, which I think is quite sad. All the animals that died and the, the sort of paradoxical assistance to the planet that this germ is given. So germs, being locked up, being in captivity is a fear.
Yeah.
And another fear would be physical harm. Because, just think a minute. When you look at your news feed, this is the weird things I do you ever wonder to yourself how they pick the stories they pick? Because right now, most of it's about the germ. But germ stories are always out there. Germ is big. Germ or, physical harm. Somebody, and think about when we've ever had a mining disaster and people were trapped under the ground and the amount of effort that people went to get those people out, thank goodness. But that really, that captures our imagination and it'll just wipe anything else off the headlines. And then funny, or like snake stories or spider stories or, things about
all the creepy crawly stuff.
Anything violence caused by people, animals, sharp objects, forces of nature. That's what Hans Rosling would say. And then, captivity. We don't like anything about captivity, jail, loss of freedom, and we don't like contamination. Like we're afraid, a lot of people are afraid of nuclear power. They got Chernobyl in their mind or Fukushima but now there's germ. Those are the things that get our attention. Now, of all the things that are going on in the world right now, all we're looking at is COVID-19. But, when I go out to the grocery, because I'm allowed to go there, there's a lot of people on the street. And a lot of things are still going on. Just think about how many things are still going on because they're essential. Nobody's paying any attention to that. It's like, no, we're all huddling in our houses waiting for an invisible germ to come and kill us. I mean,
it's kind of crazy to think about.
We don't have it in perspective. So the first thing you've got to do is get some perspective.
And how do you get perspective? Because, especially on kind of the business side of things, right? That's what did you say it again? It's rapid innovation.
Under stress.
Amidst fear, right? And so you have all these things that are all happening at the same time, and you're a business leader, let's say, right? And you need to be that person who leads from the front, right? Well, I'm assuming if you want to have a successful company, how do you approach it as a leader, within that challenging environment that we're in?
You have to be calm. Nobody wants to follow anybody who's hysterical. Now, if you think about the leaders around the world, like Angela Merkel, I got to put her up. I mean, have you watched her briefings?
I've seen some of them.
Number one, she's a scientist, and she just speaks nothing rattles her. She just speaks in a clear, calm, composed tone. She gives evidence. Because what you do not need is somebody who's hysterical and who is speculating and has no data or evidence. This is not going to be useful to anybody.
Yeah.
I'll keep names out of it. But if you think about, the calm, rational, I watched her explanation of, the reproduction factor, why it has to stay under 1. So she didn't baffle anybody with scientific terms or jargon. It was just, she told them what they needed to know about it. Bang, bang, bang. All the leaders who are being applauded at the moment have been clear, calm, composed communicators, because the first thing people need to do is to calm down so that they can use the talent of the brain they've got, because a brain that is hysterical is of no use. Do you think you can get any innovation or a solution out of someone who's just, no. So first you got to be calm. And, I looked at this when it all happened, because for my business, I teach face-to-face, revenue went to 0. And then I chair an arts company. no gatherings. And then you think about your super fund and you go, oh, don't even look at it. Because
don't even look at it.
Because, one of the things about this thing is, look, we're all in it together. That's what they keep telling us on the TV. And, it's not like just one person facing this alone. So just get calm.
Get calm.
Then you have to say, okay, if I'm calm enough now to make an assessment of the risks, if I think about the germ, this is how I thought about it personally. Okay, so how much risk is it to me? So we won't talk about my age, but look, I'm in more of a risky age group. So I'm going, okay, in terms of risk personally to me, anybody can get this and anybody can die from it because lots of people have, but we do know that there's, more chance of finishing with the virus if you're in, more mature life phases.
Yep.
So, everybody's got to assess that for themselves. Then you have to say, well, what's my exposure? Like what are the chances I'm going to come into contact with this thing? Because my risk, if we're just talking about the germ, my risk is, my predisposal to be exposed and get it and suffer a dire consequence. So if you think about a business, well, what's your, you immediately think industries. So some industries are just,
done for now.
Well, if you're in airlines, like what innovation are you going to make now?
Yeah.
You have, so you just have to get calm and say, okay, can't do that. What plans can I make? How can I handle, a hibernation? If you're in your business, say Web Profits, you guys did, dare I say, a pivot.
Yeah, we did a pivot, even though I was not attacked, but pointed out that I shouldn't be using that word because everyone's using that word. I'm like, relax, everyone.
Maybe we'll say pirouette. But if you, or look, because there's always, depending on where you're situated,
yep.
Like I was talking about age groups first, but think about where you're situated. Like you calm down, you go, where am I situated? What are my options within that? Like, if you're Zoom, wow.
Right.
Wow. Like I have lots of family members, not one person has lost their job because they work in communications. Now Web Profits is in a position to, online is your world. You're in a position to do something. So then you go into problem solving mode about what is it? What will we try? And I think that's, I don't know if any sense to you, but the approach, calm first. What is my situation?
It seems like a factor, at least from the companies I've been seeing and speaking with, that are progressing in this time. I won't say they're growing, maybe it's not the right word to say, but they're progressing and they're continuing to move and the business is operating because it can operate. There's some adaptation required, or some adaptation, is that right? It's certainly not like adaptation, but some adaptation required.
Better than pivot.
So anything but pivot. But the ability to make decisions right now, like personally, I've not experienced something like this ever in my life. And I'm not the youngest either. And so there's no real playbook of what to do right now. Is that right, Melinda? In stating that?
So you must have, in terms of your decision making, and I say this when there's no COVID-19, good decisions are based on a good process. And by the word process, I mean identifying the series of steps that you will take. And so that underpins good decision making in good times and bad times. And if we ever needed it now, with so much uncertainty, you have to know what are the steps that you are going to take in order to arrive at a decision. So you have to break things down into steps and then say, at what point will this thing trigger this thing? And when you think about the steps in a decision process, number one, identifying the issue, like that's, what's my exposure, my industry, what is my situation? Number two is option generation, criteria, evaluation of options, selection of an option, trial of an option works, doesn't work, more data, go back through the loop. That's what it is. That's what you have to do, because it's not like there's some answer to this. We've never been through this before. So
the process, I mean, that's a fantastic point, is actually having a process for how you make decisions. But it also seems that the speed where that process completes a cycle has accelerated significantly, and the faster which you can, just go through that process and to make a decision, to see the result, and then to assess, and then to make the next decision.
Yeah.
That seems to have accelerated. Just to this point, because I know in the past we've had conversations about how I have a tendency to move too fast.
Yeah.
Is that tendency also, is that a thing right now in the current environment, that you can move too fast right now?
I think you can.
You can move too fast.
Because in those steps that I was talking about, you generate options and you agree the criteria or how we'll filter the options. To filter the options, you've got to have information and evidence. And if you go so fast that you don't want to get any evidence, well, you won't be going through a cycle of decision steps. You'll just be drowning.
How do you balance the process with speed? Because
I don't know that you have to have. I mean, just think about this situation we're in right now. If everybody decides, oh, the economy has suffered, we have to go fast, let's just open everything, that's not going to be good. So if we're going to get things open, we have to get evidence. So we have to take a step. We have to have some criteria. And I've listened to a number of leaders name these 4 criteria for what has to happen as each thing opens up. And it's about testing, transmission rate. I can't remember what the others are, but they've got some criteria. So they're going to try something, going to see how it goes against that criteria, and either keep going or pull back. So there's not too many parts. Nobody's going to be rushing at speed. That is going to be a disaster. So I think the worship of speed is not necessarily the thing that we're good. You have that think, oh, everybody's saying, we're going to have a vaccine. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not shooting something in my veins that you came up with in 12 months because you let go of all the protocols and the collection of evidence and the peer reviews and everything else you have to do to make something safe. Oh, because we had to have a vaccine so we could all take that and let that kill us? I'm not up for speed there. There's never been a vaccine found yet for a coronavirus, not for SARS or MERS. They haven't found one because it mutates. I mean, you might find a treatment. Look how long it took to get treatments for AIDS and HIV. Now, do you think people wanted to go fast? Oh, yes, they did. Do you want to die because you want to go fast? Personally, I don't.
Sure, but I do think there's a difference between the health side of things and the business side of things, though, right? Like, yes, it's similar, but I guess in business right now, it's like it changes, like from week to week right now, and like it's evolving very quickly, and so if you're going through a process right now where you're trying to make the best choices, and it's in an uncertain environment. Yes, I quite like how you outline kind of the 3 parts. you come up with an idea, you put it out there, you see the evidence, and then like you analyze it, and then like you create the next idea, and so on and so forth. It feels like you can be a bit faster from a business perspective than from a health perspective, because the stakes are a bit lower than the whole world dying. You know, it's like, it's not like the whole world dying. It's like
rate of cash burn will determine pace.
Rate of cash. That's a good kind of overlay, right? The rate of cash burn is a really good overlay, like in that conversation, then, isn't it? Right? Because I think every business is different, and what they have to go through is quite different as well. You know. I
mean, you know, if you get cash and you can keep going, then you have to decide what you put that precious cash against, and it has to win. And you know, you have to move. You know, look how fast universities got, you know, teaching online. Although don't get me started on that, because
sure,
there's the kind of teaching that I like, that I think participants enjoy, and then there's, you know, other stuff. But anyway,
other stuff.
But you know, lots of things moved at pace. But you know, then there were also some assumptions about that speed on whether students had access to technology and the bandwidth to do the things online.
Right.
Because the whole world doesn't have all that, and you know, so you got to assess all the facts of your situation, because you could rush to do that.
Okay.
You know, you think about kids at home. They're supposed to, if you've got 3 kids, and they're all 3 supposed to be doing their lessons, and they're in different classes. Have you got 3 computers, or you only got 1? Like, there's some, you know, it's not just like a magical, and everybody doesn't have that. There are plenty of neighborhoods in Sydney's western suburbs where they don't have any. You know, people have they might have a phone, but they don't have a desktop. So, you know, you want to go fast and think, bang, online's the answer to everything? Maybe not. You know, you still have to employ the brain and do the thinking. And the horses want, you know, they're afraid and they want to run. Well, what if they run off a cliff?
And that's where having a good process behind kind of how you make decisions is really, really important. Yes. Let's jump quickly to the culture side. Slowly. Hasten slowly.
The Latin version of it too, which is escaping me at the moment.
Okay. Let's jump quickly to the culture side of things as well right now, because, you know, I think the unemployment rate across at least the US, Australia, and the UK is like skyrocketing, you know, and I think like that's an environment where so many people kind of have been let go because of a defensive approach where people are just trying to conserve cash, you know, so that they can kind of survive this thing. You know, what does that do to culture?
Cash you don't have.
Right. Yeah. But so what does that do for culture? And, you know, like how does a business leader kind of ensure that their culture remains as strong as possible in such an environment?
Well, I think we do have to accept that some things will be fundamentally broken. They won't come back. So there won't be any business. So there won't be a culture. Some things are not going to come back. They're gone.
Like what's not going to come back? Like what kind of things?
A lot of arts companies aren't going to come back. There's a lot. I've seen estimates that in Australia we'll lose 25% of the restaurants.
Really? 25%, yeah, because it's so hard because they just had to shut overnight and with no revenue.
And a lot of their staff, and if your staff are casual, you know, and they form and reform around projects, and they go off to wherever they go to survive. They're not going to just be there the day you want to call up and say, oh, you know, oh, they might, but they might not, you know.
Yeah, but sure.
You know, you can't give blanket answers to these things. So if you're a big company that's gonna, you know, got a good chance of surviving, like I wonder, you know, like Qantas has had to stand down most of their staff, and I'm sure they'll be ready, you know, to be called up again. And the way the leaders handled all the communication in that I heard about anyway, I'm not saying everybody was happy with everything, because you can't say that. You don't get 100% happiness. But I heard people saying, they are speaking to us on a regular basis, and you can hear in their voices, you can hear their emotion about this in their voices, and we're all sad, but the communicating, the taking people with you. Then there's lots of other companies where, think about the grocery store people. Oh my gosh. Now they have had to deal with different things because people have abused their staff.
That's crazy, isn't it? Like, who does that?
They have to deal with different elements of culture, because it's like we've got to get people to continue to come to work being afraid about getting the germ and being abused by other people. And we've got to keep them safe. So, culture for us will be about, our safety, our appreciation, our care, our demonstration of that in words and deeds, because now all the grocery stores have the grocery store equivalent of PPE. And it
what PPE? What PPE?
Personal protective equipment, PPE.
Oh, PPE. Okay, yeah, definitely.
Versus, what's happened in, say, all the meat works in the United States that have closed down, because those people were being told to come to work even when they were sick, and some of them were being told, if you don't come in, then you're going to lose your job, and then they've come in and they've gotten sick, and then they've had to shut the plants down, and the meat supply chain is really in terrible shape at the moment. They've had to shut down major plants. And so you think, now in terms of HR and culture, I think that could have been better handled.
I don't mean to laugh, but yeah.
In terms of worker safety, care about worker, appreciation of worker, because their business isn't stopping, it's essential. So I think, it's about the communicate. I think it's about the humanity.
Starting, that side of things.
And everybody's going, the grocery stores must be making a fortune. They've had to put on extra staff, to manage the queuing, to manage the hand sanitizing. They've had to put, some of them have put temporary sinks and wipes and everything out in front of their stores. They've got stanchions. They've had to shut off doorways. There's all a cost in that. So in terms of their culture and their handling of it, they're wearing those costs and they're doing the right thing. And that's demonstrating something to their staff, I think. So it's words and deeds that demonstrate, care, composure,
so
acknowledgement of situation.
It's pretty hard to be a good leader right now with all of the not conflicting challenges or the conflicting it's just like on one side of the thing, you need to ensure that the business survives. And so you got to make some hard choices in that. And then on the other side of things, you need to ensure that you're communicating about everything, and you're communicating in such a way where everyone's like, well, it's calm, and it makes sense, and there's a process behind it, and that people feel like this person, they know what's going on, and I trust their leadership. Yeah. And then the leader, they need to be vulnerable in not maybe having all of the solutions right now. Mm-hmm. And I think that is what talks to people. And I think maybe there's a challenge that lots of professionals have, is to know how to be vulnerable. So, how would you advise someone on that side of things, where you just tell them how it is, but you need to make sure it's in a way where you're still a leader and not kind of hysterical or anything, but how do you communicate at a time like this?
If you think right now to yourself, during this time, who are the leaders that you admire personally during this crisis that you've looked at and you go, wow, that person's got cred. I'd follow that person. Who comes to mind for you?
I've been so internally focused that I haven't really looked out externally so far. All of the external leaders that I've kind of had impact on are more the leaders of kind of the countries around the world. So
okay, we'll pick one of them.
Prime Minister of New Zealand, like.
And what is it about
Jacinta?
her? Because what is it about her that people appreciate so much? Because they appreciated it before now, and now her ratings are going through the roof. What would you say it is?
She made the right choices, and she took aggressive action to stop the thing spreading, and she was kind of decisive about it, right? Like she was like, this is happening, this is how it's going to go, this is why, and we'll see how it goes at the end of this, right? And she just went straight to the heart of the problem. She didn't like spread it out for too long, and she's been commended for it now.
Yeah, and when she speaks, because she's a masterful communicator.
Yeah.
And the empathy, because your question to me was, how do you show vulnerability as a leader?
Yeah.
Now, I would say that she has the balance right, because it's about the mix of empathy, the recognition of what's going on for people, and all combined with this is what we're doing. Now, you may not like it, and this is going to be difficult. This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
But at that same time, countering that with the messages that demonstrate the understanding that may go to your own feelings. If I go back to Angela Merkel again, when she gave her first briefing that went viral, she said something like, I understand what it means, coming from the Eastern Bloc of Germany. I understand what personal freedoms mean, and how hard fought, what we had to do to get those personal freedoms, and then to ask people now to give them up, to stay at home. It was something to that effect. Now, don't you think that demonstrates some level of vulnerability?
Yeah.
So it's what you say, and it's how you communicate. That's why I wrote the book about words, because it's not, when you talk about all the things that Jacinda Ardern did, actually, most of what she's done is communicate and take decisions, because the leader's not actually physically doing things, and I, you won't like this, Alex, you can't confuse action and speed with, getting the result that you want. They're parts of it, but they're not the whole thing. That's why, I'm always on this thing of employ the brain. We don't want analysis paralysis, because we want action and we want people to be decisive. But, if there's no decision you can take yet, then you just have to speak and explain why. I think she does that. I think,
yeah, got it.
I think there's, a number of leaders. Like if you think about, I don't know if you've listened to any of Andrew Cuomo's briefings. He does a briefing every single day in New York. Now, he might be tired of saying the things he's saying, because people go, oh, I've already said that, they should have it, I'm bored with that, I got to get on to, there's a lot of things to do here. But no, every day, does the briefing, he starts out with the data. There's a format to it every single day.
And that gives you trust, doesn't it?
And he shows all of the leaders are up with their chief medical officer. I mean, think about the guy that on the ABC, Norman Swan. He seems to be very popular at the moment. What do you think it is about? Have you watched any of him?
No, I haven't.
Oh, well, you got to look at the people that people are, talking about and respecting. If you look at what they're doing, like Norman Swan, he's there on his Corona cast, and he is calm. He is methodical. People put the questions up. If he doesn't know the answer, he goes, I don't know. He got asked a question the other day, and he said, I don't think anybody has the answer to that, and I don't know.
It takes a lot for somebody to say, I don't know, doesn't it? It takes a certain level of confidence to be able to admit people that you don't know, right? And for the more junior leaders, I guess, that haven't had as much experience and that feel like they should have an answer right now.
I suppose.
How do they approach it?
What's your definition of leadership? Is your definition or is someone's definition of a leader a person who has all the answers all the time? because it's not my definition of leadership.
What's your definition of leadership?
My definition of leadership is someone who understands the environment and the needs and wants of the people they're leading, and can take actions in that environment that resonate with people such that people will want to go ahead with that action. It's not somebody
not having all the answers.
Do this. I don't see that, because I don't think that the world's that simple, that there's just, if there was an answer to everything out there that one person could have for an organization of 50,000 people, well, it'd be pretty easy to appoint a CEO, wouldn't it? Because there's a basket of answers and anybody can pick them up.
Yeah, sure.
Like, isn't it kind of simplistic to think that the person who's the leader is going to have the answer to everything? Like, the older I get, the more I know there's not answers to things. There's more questions in the world than there are answers.
That's something I can certainly attest to as well, and it's something which the more that you learn, the more that you realize how much, how little you actually know. Yeah. Let's jump quickly now then to all right, cool. So now we've made all of our choices, we've got a plan, we're communicating with the team. It's going we're being kind of open with it. We've got kind of the balance of empathy, but also a plan of this is what's happening. Yeah. What are what companies, or what are the characteristics of a company that's going to come out of this stronger than when they came into it? If that even is a possibility in terms of this stage, outside of market trends. Yeah. So obviously Zoom's going to come out stronger, right?
Yeah.
but outside of that top percentile of organizations that have instantly scaled up, the rest that have had to make these harder choices, that have had to make these plans, that potentially have had to let some people go and to communicate about all this. What are the characteristics of the ones that will come out stronger as a result?
Well, we'll have to say it's a balance of things. So I think, the ones that were reasonably strong beforehand, they had strong balance sheets. That's like a strong immune system. They got a better chance. If you were on the verge before this happened, oops.
Right.
That's not, you can see in the retail world, a lot of companies were on the edge, and now it's just, this is the last straw. Oh, and it's more than a straw. It's like kaboom. Yeah. So, there's the companies that'll come through will have had a strong balance sheet, and they would have had, a bigger range of moves on the board that they could make. And they would be able to make those moves because they had leadership that demonstrated some care about the people who were on the boat. I think, if you came through this and that, you may not, you're never going to be happy with everything, but that your employer stood by you as best they could and communicated with you, then you'll still be ready to, come to grips with it, whatever its new form might be.
Yeah, right.
I think people have to have felt that somebody cared about them through this. How do you?
Yeah, no, sure. How do you transition to Zoom as a company, right? I know that you like the face-to-face interaction, right? And the majority of the world, I think, is the same, right? People like to be around other people, and you just don't get the same connection through a screen. You don't get the energy from someone else. You kind of get a little bit of it, 5%, let's say. But how do you transition to that kind of a world overnight? And instantly, we're all locked down. If we want to continue to operate a business, we're all on Zoom. How do you establish connection in that point?
Well, I think, people had no choice. So that's what they did. We're all like stay up on a screen. They had no choice. So you had to make trade-offs, and you had to do some things that aren't your preferred options because you had absolutely no choice. So then when things open up a little bit, then you've got to decide, okay, so what worked well about that and what didn't? So I think companies might make some changes about, whether they fly down to Melbourne for a meeting from Sydney and back in a day, because maybe you could do that on Zoom. But if that meeting, depending on what the meeting is and how many people need to be in it and how critical the decision is, you're going to get on that plane and fly.
Okay.
You're not going to just say everything's going to be on Zoom. Because even when we weren't, Zoom was around before this thing. Lots of people were doing meetings on Zoom, but, people maybe tended to want to be in a meeting room together because they could be, and, maybe it wasn't that important depending on what that, content was about. Like if it was a meeting to, show content versus, debate vigorously a really critical decision, maybe you would make, a distinction between those kind of meetings post-COVID because you can. Whereas now, you got no choice. You've got no choice.
So on that point then, so when do you think it's absolutely critical to be in the same, to be like face-to-face with someone?
Well,
because it's not always the case, but there's going to be some times when you just need to be side by side with someone to really get the full value. Like, is there that?
I'm going to do a board meeting tomorrow night on Zoom because I don't have a choice. I do not have a choice.
But if you had the choice,
there is no way I would do that. Not with the number of things that we have to talk about, that I have to be able to facilitate everybody's contribution. And, and it's not like an educational situation where you can go, let's have the raise hand button. I mean, I cannot see that. I just cannot see that. Now, I can see that there would be, maybe some board meetings about like if somebody was going to make a presentation to us about a particular thing and we just needed to learn that and they were going to do slides and we could ask questions, that's one thing. But when you're coming to a board meeting, you're making important decisions. And like two of our board members are stepping down. And I want to give them I wanted to hand them flowers. I wanted to go out to dinner with them afterwards. I wanted to, toast. Gone. So, things where there's emotion that matters and there's, really critical decisions and you really have to read everybody and be able to know that they really expressed their opinion. Oh, wow.
So then,
face to face.
So does that then mean, and maybe this is the final discussion, I don't know how short it will be because it's probably a big one, right? But culture. You would have had culture before the pandemic. Now everything's on Zoom, right? Is the culture created in person? Is it created kind of outside of the platform? Like, it could be Zoom. It could be like based inside of like an office. Like, where's the culture created right now, and how is it being kind of affected because everything's online and through Zoom?
Well, all the limitations of our interactions with each other are affecting us. Because let's get to a definition of culture. It's a very abstract term. The way we do things around here. So have we changed our decision protocols because we're on Zoom? If we haven't, well, we've still retained that aspect of our culture. Are we still talking to each other with respect even though we're on a screen? Well, we've retained that aspect of our culture. Have we decided not to speak to each other because we're sick of little Zoom boxes? Well, that is impacting our culture. So it's how we're, and there's a lot about how people are feeling versus what they're actually doing on Zoom, and whether we're picking that up or not, because we're all disparate now. I've been thinking about that question a lot, and I've been wondering if it's going to make us more machine-like in the future. And
because is culture stronger or created a lot stronger when it's in the same office versus if it is, like this through screens? Is that like a big impact on culture?
You got to think about, when I was writing about this, I had my little, diagram about all the things that impact the way we do things around here. So you won't be surprised that I'll say words and language. So we've still got words and language. We still got that. Physical space, we don't have that now. So that aspect, and being able to, create a vibe out of physical space, we don't have that. Rituals, people have converted the rituals, like people are having Zoom drinks, they're trying to have Zoom proms, Zoom weddings, Zoom conferences. So that rituals are impacted, but people seem to be trying to retain some of them, or maybe make new ones. I don't know. Formal statements, we still got those. People are still making formal statements. Banks are making statements. People are making statements on that. We still have that. Rules and procedures. I don't think people have dumped all their rules and procedures because they're working on Zoom. And sort of their mental state about, whether they think they can impact things versus they just have to sit back and receive it. I don't think that would have changed. People who think the world's happening to them would probably just sink lower in this, and people that think that they have the capacity to impact their world, they're out there trying things, doing things. And depending on, as a leader, what you're exhibiting, it could increase people's ability to try versus make them want to sag and sit down. So, the things, the elements that you can observe of a culture, most of them are still there. Okay. They're all still there. I mean, like somebody made a fraudulent transaction on my credit card the other day. So you have to phone the bank. That hasn't changed. I talked to the person on the phone. It was exactly the same. All of the same things happened. So some things are not, this hasn't changed everything.
So it's the physical component of culture that's changed right now. But most other things have stayed the same. Like if you've kept them the same, if you've changed them, that's when the culture changes, right? Like if all of a sudden you're not kind of adapting that well to Zoom life, and you're now changing how the business operates, that can affect the culture right now. Yeah.
And not everybody's, believe it or not everybody's working on Zoom.
There's Microsoft Teams as well. That's the other one, but not all video conference.
Oh no, I'm not even talking about software. I'm talking about people who are in construction. There's some guys out in the back there that are building. They've been building for 6 months. They're still building. They don't work on Zoom. I mean, let us not think that we're the whole world, because we're not.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in a grocery store and you do checkout, you're not on Zoom. You're still going in there doing the same things you always did. People make the mistake of thinking what I'm doing is the whole world. There's 7 billion, 8 billion of us on the planet, and we're all having a different experience. And if each one of us thinks our experience is everybody else's, you're sadly mistaken. Not everybody's working on Zoom.
Yeah.
Only
that's interesting. Yeah. I think construction seems to be one of those the essential services, it seems, that they can continue to construct right now.
Well, abattoirs don't work on Zoom. If you're supplying the fruit
any of the food
and the trucks, you don't work on Zoom. You're just working the way you always did. I don't think, maybe the management ranks they're doing more Zoom, but a whole lot of other people. If you're a nurse or a doctor, you're not working on Zoom.
That's a good reminder, especially
not take over the whole world.
Yeah, sure.
They don't intubate you via Zoom.
They don't.
There in front of the ventilator.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's really easy to forget that, especially because, for us and for everyone who we deal with, it's via Zoom, and I think like a lot of the companies that can adapting just via Zoom. I think if you kind of have some stuff like in the real world, where it's like the physical world, I think there's other challenges around that as well.
It's one tool. It's one tool that people are using. It doesn't mean that all of life became Zoom because it didn't.
It does seem to be the main communication channel for a lot of white collar kind of side of things at the moment, You
do a lot of meetings and you're in management, but that isn't everything. It's not everything. It isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've done lots of, and there's been lots of socializing on Zoom that people weren't doing before. And quite frankly, I'm sick of that. And some of, I had some friends from the United States write to me on the weekend, and I thought, oh, geez, maybe it would be good to Zoom. And I wrote back and they said, oh, we're Zoomed out. I'm like, okay, it's cool.
Yeah, it's funny now because before like, everything was in the screen, and then like you'd stop and you'd actually have to go talk to people. Not have to go, but like you'd go talk to people and you'd socialize. But now you go from the business kind of conversations to personal conversations, and it's like, and then at some point you close the screen and it's just you at home potentially.
My daughter's wedding got canceled, so we did a Zoom at the point where we would have been toasting and slicing wedding cake.
Oh no, sorry to hear.
I gotta tell you, Zoom's no substitute.
Zoom is no substitute for that.
I don't think, and my daughter's not, like some people are doing a Zoom wedding because they want to go ahead. She said, no. It's not everything. It's a tool, and it's a good tool. It's a really good tool.
And I think that's a really good point as well, is that your culture is not the tools that you use. It's how you think. It's how you operate. It's the people, and it's how you engage with the people, and it's independent of tools, of anything else. Yes, there is some additional benefits in being in person, but that's just one part of it. And I think to anyone who's listening, who's maybe stuck in the tools, it's not about the tools. It's about the people. And you can pick up the phone and speak to people, and there's so many ways to engage with people. And I think that to the leaders out there, to find that combination between kind of empathy and strength in decision making, and to communicate well, if I can summarize it well. Yeah. And it's not all about Zoom. That was that last part.
I mean, you have to think. Oh, it takes, there's more cognitive load at the moment because you've got to think, okay, I can't go to that meeting room and see people. So how am I going to organize them? And then if I do get them in a Zoom meeting room, how am I going to make that effective? Because it's different. It's a different set of, there's like every tool, you don't use a screwdriver the same way you use a hammer. So you've got to figure out, how do I use that tool? But it's just a tool.
It's just a tool, yeah. Just
a tool, and some people are better on the tools than others.
That's for sure. Well, obviously, I love Zoom, so that's great.
It's good, and when you think about the distances in the world, you don't just fly to New York at the drop of a hat anyway, do you? Or maybe some people do, but so it's fantastic. I mean, it's another tool, and one of the good things is so many more people have utilized it during this period that they'll have good practice with it, and they'll have there'll be more opportunities and ways for people to use it and be good at it. But I don't think that people are going to stop meeting face to face. Gee, I don't want to be on a planet like that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be slow in terms of the uptake because people are mostly now scared of the germ and the contamination, which you said before, and the physical harm side of things, and so trying to find that balance
Yeah, I mean, look at what people have done during this thing. Like, in Italy and Spain, they were out on the balconies singing and waving to each other. Or in the UK, they all went out on the balconies and banged their tins at the same hour. They didn't stay inside and bang their tin on Zoom. They went out and they saw each other. For the dawn service, people went out to the ends of their driveways and stood there at 6 a.m. They did not Zoom.
Yeah, it's a tool. And I think that physical connection is the thing that I think is missing right now from everything in society right now. And I think that's the one thing I'm seeing. Like as soon as we heard the news that the restrictions are going to be like a bit open and you could see people, everyone's out. It's like, it's like the same people that 2 weeks earlier were like, no, we're not going to see anyone. It's like, yeah, we're ready to go and mingle now. We're ready to go and just connect and just be relaxed with someone else. Cause Zoom is like you start it and you stop it. It's not like you just kind of have it always on. It's just there and you're just kind of hanging out, and I think, I think that's a super point. Melinda,
yes,
thank you so much for doing another podcast with us.
I love talking with you, Alex.
You're my go-to person for anything around the people culture side of things, because it's to me it's kind of as complex as, well, it's so much more complex than anything in the digital space, like any complex technical strategy, whatever else it is, which they can get complex. People.
Oh yeah, you're way ahead of me on that
level. Yeah, well, that part's easy compared to the people stuff. And so for anyone who needs help in this respect, and I think there are quite a lot of leaders out there that I think are stuck right now and that could use some advice, I highly recommend speaking to Melinda Muth. You can find her on LinkedIn. The link's going to be in the show notes. And sometimes it is good just to have a conversation with someone who just knows a little bit more about the world than you. And for me, that's a lot of people. I'm pretty good at the digital space. Outside of that space, I try to find experts everywhere I can, just so that I don't have to make all the mistakes. And I highly recommend speaking to Melinda if you are stuck right now. But look, Melinda, thank you so much for being on this podcast again. Can't wait to speak to you in person, not on Zoom.
Great speaking with you, and I want to speak with you in person as soon as we can.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much.
Take care. Okay, bye.
Cool. Thanks for listening to the Growth Manifesto podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please head on over to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. For more episodes, please visit growthmanifesto.com/podcast.